Hey everybody, Eric Hayden here on YouTube. Want to do a quick video follow-up to some of the things we've showed you over the last couple videos. If you've been watching, we talked a little bit about winter protection and some things that you can do in the garden to get tidied up for the winter. I kind of want to show you the results of some of the cold air that we've had, some things you just can't get around and other things you might be able to do to keep your roses going well right into the spring. So we got down to 15 degrees a couple mornings ago. And then prior to that, we were 20 degrees. So we did have some pretty cold weather by Eastern North Carolina standards. You can see there is some dieback on some of these roses. Like we've mentioned before, that is something that you can cut out. And if it's just on the tips of the roses, not really a big deal. The other thing I pointed out, these roses are starting to try to come out because we've had cold weather, but also very, very warm weather. Today it's near 70 degrees. We've had temperatures in the 60s as well as the 20s and teens, so kind of all over the place. You'll notice that these leaves were not really impacted too much. Some of them got burned a little bit with the cold air, but keep that in mind that if you have some roses trying to push out, there may be some slight damage, but even if this gets damaged, if you go lower on the cane, down lower on the bush itself, these down here are a little bit more dormant. In addition, we've mentioned this before, each one of these bud eyes, there's 3 chances. There's a middle one and then 2 terminal ones. Let's see if I can show you. This one looks pretty good over here. I'm going to show you one example of that. Probably right here is the best example. Get my camera to focus. So there's 3 different bud eyes. The middle one will be the most dominant one. If that fails for some reason, these 2 side buds are farther behind, slower, so they're more able to take the cold. So you got 3 chances. If they all fail, let's say you've got dieback that goes down the cane, you just keep pruning lower and lower and lower until you have a bud eye that has not been damaged, or you have canes that have not been damaged. So you can see some varying impacts. Most of the bush is green, but obviously that cane right there has been damaged. So what are some factors that influence whether or not your rose makes it through the winter? One is hydration. I've got the hose out now. I'm going to water these roses because we're in the 60s. We haven't had a good rain in about almost 2 weeks. So I still try to keep an inch or so per week to 10 days on the garden. If a rose is well hydrated, free of disease, and it didn't have a lot of issues going into the fall, it's more likely to survive if it's a healthy rose. So that's something that can tip the scales. If it's a smaller rose, maybe it's not established, it may have more issues. This is one example of some bare roots I planted later in the season. Looks like a lot of them have had some pretty good dieback. You can see some green here, versus something that's more established, like this rose here has little dieback at all. So a lot of it's going to come down to, was it hardy, healthy, has it been hydrated through the winter? It's much more likely, especially if it's quite established, to survive the winter than not. And then other times it's just nothing you can do. It comes down to the variety. This was a little bit more established than the rose I just showed you prior in terms of planting it in the ground, but you can see hardly anything winter dieback wise, maybe a little bit on the edge, but this is quite healthy going into the middle part of the winter. So it can come down to just the variety. Some are more susceptible to the cold air damage than others, but for the most part we've had some dieback, but things are looking pretty good. One last thing I'll show you, and I did some videos on this already, winter protection, usually maybe some chopped up leaves is all I do around the roses, but with the anticipation of that cold weather, we put down mulch, and I only do this maybe once every 5 years if we have temperatures expected to get below 20. It doesn't help anything above the mulch pile. You can see this green cane here, but this is dead. The one thing that I'm going to do different this year, in fact I may do this today or tomorrow, I've noticed that this is dead and there's not much you can do about that, and just to prune it out. Sometimes I'll wait until the spring to prune that out, but I'm going to prune this out now. Whenever I see anything dead, I've noticed it'll continue down the rose bush, and if it continues all the way to the bud union, it could die. So notice this dieback goes all the way down here. So I'm going to prune to this bud eye where there's healthy growth still, and just get rid of that. It's almost like something that is going to spread and potentially kill the bush. I'd rather get rid of it sooner than later. Those mulch piles can help, especially the canes they cover up. So in this case, this cane is all dead, but as I pull this back and the mulch back, you can see that there is green down here. So hopefully that's good to go. It does keep the cane a little warmer on those extreme colds, but what it does more than that is it protects it. It keeps it from getting too warm or too cold. It kind of moderates the temperature. If we were 15, you know, those canes were still exposed to below freezing air, but with the mulch around it, it modifies the extreme lows and also the extreme highs. So it modifies the temperature. And the other thing it really does is it keeps moisture in those canes. It doesn't allow them to dry out as much. So you can see that we showed you some videos on this, but you can see the effect of putting some of that mulch down. And the whole idea is, again, you're not going to save the whole bush. You don't need to save all those canes. All this can be pruned out. You really, really, really want to protect what's down underneath that, and that's the bud union. Here in North Carolina, growing on mainly Fortuniana, our bud union is above the ground. So I've lost more bushes due to winter temperatures than I ever did in upstate New York, where it was on multiflora, which tends to be more hardy, and then also we would plant a couple inches below ground, the graft. As long as the graft survives, you're good to go. So you can see varying amounts of dying canes. That's something I'll prune out, and these others I'll just prune back a little bit. So it's kind of a wait and see spring, see what happens with these roses. If I see anything where the progression of the dead cane looks like it's going lower on the bush, that's an example where I may just cut above a good bud eye and get rid of this dead before it kind of goes on all the way down to the bud union itself. Here's another example on Veterans Honor. Again, this part of the cane is dead, but down here is green, so I may prune back here in the next couple days just to get rid of it. And here's more examples of, there's plenty of bud eyes on here lower down. If you can see that little one right there, those are more dormant. So roses are pretty tough. Have I lost a bush here and there? Yes, but if you kind of follow those rules of keeping them healthy, going into winter, well hydrated, sprayed, and then when you have extreme cold, consider mulching and mounting them up with leaves or mulch, or if you're lucky, when it snows, that's a great insulator. Put that on there. So that's it for today. This is middle part of January. Again, we had temperatures down to 15 and 20, and now we're 69. So it's hard to grow in a climate where you have that extremes, and our soil is 100% sand if you haven't followed us. So that is something that dries out really quickly as well. So follow along, and we'll kind of show you through the months of February, and especially around here, March into April is when these things should start pushing out and starting to get some blooms last week of April and the first 3 weeks of May. Have a good one, everyone.